welcome to the State of Anarchy. We're your hosts, Carmen and Sonny. And today we have a lot of really interesting and what I would consider a wide-spanning list of topics to talk about that are all weirdly interconnected. And the first one I think we want to kick it off with is kind of hot right now in the news, or at least should be, but it's only on the censored channels. Which ironically, one of the censored channels is We Are Change, and of course Jeff Berwick's channel, who recently did a guerrilla raid on Jeffrey Epstein's private island.
Yeah, we were talking about that recently, and you actually told me that, I guess, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the drone footage of Epstein's island, but there was a door that looked like it was barred from the outside or whatever. It looked like it had one of them old-fashioned like pieces of wood or whatever. And didn't you say that that Berwick said that was actually painted?
Yeah, if you watch the video, it looks like a prop. You know what I mean? Something that would be in like a theater play.
Like it probably wouldn't be able to actually like contain somebody.
Yeah, like it was probably just like fucking. It's probably like as strong as like a piece of plywood or something. You know what I mean?
Okay,
it's more.
I mean, then again, I mean, I maybe I should rewatch the video, but I mean, even that mechanism, like, was that mechanism still there?
No, that was painted on.
That was painted, so there was no way.
That little like locking thing that looks like like an old school barracks type, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was painted on. It was like it was straight 2-dimensional. You could see it when it was up close.
Well,
but it's obviously meant to represent a chamber of like capture.
Well, right. I mean, if you look at that building, it has like really big windows and stuff. I don't think that's where you would necessarily store your captives or whatever, but I think that's interesting. It would be interesting if we could actually have a conversation with him about it, and it
would be interesting if it was in like the news at all.
It would be interesting if the security cameras didn't just happen to stop working right before he killed himself.
Yeah, so like that's for people who aren't familiar. This guy's island essentially was visited by like essentially every important political figure in America and elsewhere too. Like, right?
I mean, I don't. Listen. It seems as though I don't know if it was everyone. I mean, but it was a lot of power players, so to speak, celebrities and stuff. I mean, I think
you got what Bill Clinton is.
Bill Clinton was supposedly not supposedly. There's flight. There are flight logs.
That's the thing. It's these like incriminating flight logs that are like the nail in the coffin, at least for a connection, at least for an investigation.
Yeah, but if you're gonna, just as a quick aside, if you're gonna do anything illegal, don't use private planes because they are keeping track of everyone. I watched a show about a girl who was trying to traffic. She was trafficking like hundreds of pounds of pot in like a private plane, and then once the FBI or the DA got wind of it, they just checked the manifest and be like, well, why were you traveling from LA to Ohio
over and over again, like with the same people? And like they caught this girl for selling weed, but they can't seem to connect the dots between all of these presidents and ex-presidents going to this random island.
There's actually
with weird props on it and goblin statues.
I should have watched it in its entirety, but there's a interview with Prince Andrew that's out right now that they did on British TV, and Prince Andrew is the younger brother of Prince Charles, who's the heir to the British crown or whatever, and there's photographs of him and Epstein. Even there's even video documentation of them together after Epstein was accused of being a pedophile, like after all that shit came out.
Oh shit!
And I mean, I didn't, like I said, again, I didn't watch it in its entirety, but the clips that I did see, he seemed pretty disingenuous. Mm-hmm. His answers weren't too convincing. I think his argument was that the reason why he was, photographed and videotaped with Epstein after all that came out was like supposed to be their final closing, like, friendship meeting or whatever. I don't know what you would call it, but like,
I must say goodbye to you now because you're a convicted pedophile.
So let me stay over your house for a couple of days. But Yeah, so it's just interesting. I know it's
There's actually a funny aside. Somebody asked Donald Trump about Prince Andrew because they apparently have like a couple pictures together and have been noted at like multiple events together. And Donald Trump, I think, is on like record saying he doesn't know him. Like that was his response to that question.
well,
I never met the guy.
and that's hard to believe. Especially in this day and age. But then again, I guess the argument. Well, I don't know. Trump's argument would probably be he met so many people, but if you met like a prince,
If you met the heir to the throne of like the fucking England, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of somebody you would remember,
right? I mean,
especially if you're in a couple pictures with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's interesting, and it I don't know. I mean, I think that it's important to just keep beating this dead horse because
it's so insane, the implications of it. That's the important part.
And they're going to throw out... Right now what's going on is they are leaving the 2 guards out to dry. I don't think...
It's their fault, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm saying they. I don't know who they is. I don't even know... Like, it seems as though they're putting these... If there was a hand behind it, they're throwing these guards out to dry because they're being... brought up on charges now for like falsifying documents and stuff like that, and because what happened was the guards supposedly, as well as the security cameras not working, the guards supposedly fell asleep or something, and falsely reported that they had checked on Epstein when they hadn't, which that's what they're saying. So that's just quite the coincidence. I mean, I've never been in federal prison, so I don't know how often. I mean, I bet you it happens all the time, honestly, that prison guards forge shit like that. Because who's checking? I mean, how often is somebody actually killing themselves? But
like with such a high profile arrest.
And the security camera thing, too. Like,
just so happens to simultaneously malfunction.
It's a federal prison in Manhattan holding the most high profile prisoner in the country. The coincidences are too much of a stretch for me to just take on the chin. I mean, I think this is one of the few like quote unquote conspiracy theories that like the general public is pretty much all on board with. Like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense.
Yo, it's wild because like, and there seems to be some sort of a disconnect because people get it, but they don't really understand. It's like, okay, well, if you get that and you get the reason why something like that might happen, and you know, a guy like that might mysteriously die, and why he might mysteriously die, and what he was involved in, and what the implications of that means, that the people who are running countries are involved in this sort of like filth, essentially.
I mean, it's kind of interesting that it's just interesting that no newspaper, no legitimate organizations are championing the story. This story is highly freaking interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, this is if I had the funds to like do a full length documentary on it. I mean, obviously, listen. By the way, if you are interested in a feature length documentary on this, Derek Bros has put out terrific material on not only Jeffrey Epstein but not the searchers,
the finders,
and some other I don't know, just really great work. And he was on this shit before anybody was. He was really one of the only sources of information about this guy for a long time.
Very true.
I just would think any journalist worth their salt would love to tackle this story. I mean, even if they believe the guy really did kill himself, I mean, it's still a fucking interesting story. It's still a person, a convicted sex offender, with connections to the most powerful people in the world. I mean, how do you not want to investigate that further? How do you not want a
mysterious death?
Right. I mean, how do you not just want to look into it and see what it is? You write a book or something about it. I mean, that's what journalists do about everything else.
Exactly.
There's a Netflix documentary or an HBO series about every serial killer and every, you know, mob boss or whatever. But this is, to me, far more relevant to I don't know, to the public. I mean,
to public safety.
I mean, fucking Ted Bundy really doesn't have any effect on my life. Or the guy from making a murderer. I mean, if he was if people are falsely convicted or people are being murdered by serial killers, I'm not saying I don't care, but in terms of like how it would have. I think it's much more relevant if the most powerful people in the world are involved in a pedophile ring than it is if, what Ted Bundy.
Yeah, than like a single like psychopath just
Right.
running loose in like, the wild, essentially. The documentary Derek made is called Who Will Find What the Finders Hide? And it's about this cult that like essentially there was connections to CIA cover-ups, intelligence agencies and stuff like that.
The
connected to all this human
the
trafficking.
founder of this cult was connected to intelligence agencies, and it's. I mean, I don't want to. It's highly implied that they were involved in some. I would just say inappropriate behavior with children. We'll say.
Yeah.
I don't know. There were rapports of rapes and stuff like that I don't think
That were eventually like retracted once they were given.
They never were led to convictions.
It's all in the documentary. It's very interesting.
I think there was a child with like fucking anal contusions. But
then like the guy said that report. The guy who gave that report went back on it, and then when Derek tried to find him, this dude like ran away. He told the story in the interview.
Yeah, it's a great documentary. Who Will Find What the Finders Find? That's on his YouTube channel. These Epstein documentaries on there. We've interviewed him twice, I think.
Yeah, we
at
talked
least.
about it. We talked about stuff like that a few times. The whole first one was about that Finders documentary.
Yes. So if you want to just get the summary of it, you can check out the interview Carmen did with Derek earlier. But
At an Acapulco.
true. Listen, we're not the only people talking about this Epstein thing, and in all reality,
But we shouldn't. But there should be way more than us and the people who are.
And if you're listening to this, odds are you have a vague, at the very least, a vague notion, and more likely than not, a pretty good grasp of this story. But I think that the key is to keep this in the public consciousness so that someone has to take it up, so it can't be ignored. If we just keep it, even in the form of a meme. Like, I love the Epstein didn't kill himself meme. I think it's great. I think
it's amazing.
It should go on in perpetuity until something's actually done about this, or some sort of conclusion is reached. I mean, I know they're ostensibly looking into it. They're going to charge these cops, but in all reality,
that's not what the public's looking for.
Right, it's not what they're looking for. And like these guys, I don't know what the criminal penalty is, but I doubt it's like a crazy amount of time.
Yeah.
And
you're going after these cops. That's not the villain in this situation. The
Right.
villain is the people getting away with getting rid of the key witness. If that's what happened.
I mean, how does a self-respecting journalist not at least look at that and say, okay, this is a coincidence that merits looking into? I mean, if you watch any like Michael Moore documentary, right? They'll make assertions about, which again, I'm not even saying they're false, but they'll make connections between like politicians and certain companies. Like the example that comes to mind is Dick Cheney and Halliburton. Halliburton's a defense contracting, a company that has defense contracts, or contracts with the Defense Department. Dick Cheney was either vice president or CEO over the time. And what I'm saying of that company at the time, and then he was a vice president. And Michael Moore's argument in his documentary Fahrenheit 9/11 is that conflict of interest caused Dick Cheney to promote the war, to help the military-industrial complex. And listen, that may well be true. I don't think Moore does the best. I don't know. I don't think he presents the best argument in the world in that particular documentary, but it's hard to prove something like that. To be fair,
Very true.
But my point is, he's looked at as a legitimate journalist and documentarian for making those kinds of connections, even though there's really not like a definitive, there's no document where Dick Cheney's like, in order for Halliburton to make more money, we will invade Iraq. It's kind of circumstantial. See, what the fuck is this? Great. The argument is, it's just circumstantial. Well, circumstantial evidence can be used against you in court.
Yeah.
People act like circumstantial evidence doesn't mean anything, and it can be used in a court of law against you. Why would it not merit some, type 1A journalists to do this? I mean, we and you were talking about it, but we have a podcast with 2,000 people on our YouTube channel. There's journalists that work for the fucking New York Times that should be really interested in this.
Well, did you hear about the ABC journalist who apparently almost broke this story?
Yes. And then I mean, she would again. Why is she? I don't want to say for sure that she's been silent on it but I don't know for a fact. But she was silent for a number of years at the very least until that clip came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just important. It's ridiculous, and it's anyone who argues that there's no conspiracy theories or argues against conspiracy theories and thinks that. And I hate to use the term conspiracy. Everything's a conspiracy.
I hate the term conspiracy theory because it was created by the government.
Well, everything's a fucking conspiracy. I mean, listen, the plan to invade Iraq was a fucking conspiracy. You know what I mean? And that's not like that's not even a loaded term. I mean, it's a bunch of guys plotted a war. I mean, what is that? It's a conspiracy. I mean, it's right or wrong. That's what it is. So. Any complex plan or anything involving more than one person is going to require conspiracy. It's meant to undermine these things, and I just think that the public needs to continue this meme. I guess. I mean, it's so fucking nuts the modern age that we're in. That like. I don't know. That's what the layman has. That's the only tools we have is our fucking wit and our like. Sarcasm
and our ability to convey a message in 0.2 seconds to someone's brain.
Yeah, and
that's
like
the attention span nowadays.
And like it's like we have like this dark humor about it where we just kind of accept it. And these, again, I know people that think that it's ridiculous to even make this argument that of course the guy killed himself. He was in jail. Like, why would you even think? That's what the official story is. They're investigating these guys. They just fell asleep and falsified the records, and their security cameras was broke. Like, what's the problem? I mean,
3 buildings knocked down 2 planes. It's normal.
Conspiracy theory. That's another thing, man. Listen, I for a very long time used to battle with you about 9/11, and I'm not an engineer like you, and I'm not an architect, and I don't claim to have this kind of knowledge, but I am very skeptical, and I have talked to what was the organization that we interviewed?
So
Architects is it Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth?
So that's going to be part of the State of Anarchy vault where we just randomly start releasing all these.
Oh, we never
interviews.
Released that.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a great. Actually, you know what? Maybe that should be the next one we release.
All right, yeah, let's do that. That'll be the next thing.
We have
that
a great
out.
documentary.
We interviewed what's his name? It's Richard Gage, because I didn't want to say Richard Grove because I know his coach. Richard Gage, who is I think he's the head guy of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And me,
is that the organization? Is that what's actually
the organization?
Called?
Yeah.
How the fuck did I remember that?
Huh?
I can't believe I remembered that correctly. I thought I was going to be wrong.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Okay. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And me as being somebody who went to engineering school, I have an engineering degree from Temple University. That is what got me into conspiracy theories, because while I was studying statics, which is literally like the physics of things like buildings or structures, essentially, I watched this documentary called Zeitgeist, where the whole second portion of it is about like the whole physics problem with 9/11.
Well, all right, I'm gonna.
And it was just it's such a mind fuck to me.
I'm gonna ask you questions like a dumbass, because I really am not familiar with any of the like physics behind. Like I'm very I passed physics by the skin of my teeth in high school. But explain to me what the official narrative is as to why not Towers 1 and 2, but
World Trade Center 7.
7.
That's the Trump card.
What is the official narrative? Because that is what I don't want to say convinced, but that is what led me to at least be a little skeptical about what the mainstream narrative is, because of the fact that, interestingly enough, they did a show on like National Geographic Channel that was like the 9/11 conspiracies, like fact checks or whatever, and they like went through like, I guess, I mean they pretended like they were being fair, but clearly the intention was to debunk these theories, and they never once addressed the Tower 7. They didn't say anything about it, which is the whole reason I watched the documentary. I said I wanted to know what they were going to say about Tower 7, and they didn't even talk about it. So tell me what, and if I were to read the 9/11 Commission report, why would they say that Tower 7 fell?
Well, they would say it was due to office fires that caused the structural steel to become unstable.
What caused the office fires?
Explosions and debris crashing from World Trade Centers 1 and 2, apparently. Which, if you look at a bird's eye diagram of New York City, there's actually buildings in between World Trade Centers 1 and 2 and World Trade Center 7. There's actual buildings in between those buildings that didn't fall and weren't affected. World Trade Center 7, and the videos of it falling. And the best part about WTC 7 is that there's so many great videos of it falling. So we have such great physical evidence to draw from as scientists and engineers. We can see these, like, literally, it looks like a couple, like cubicles might be on fire on, like, the 43rd floor. Like, it's not an inferno by any means. And then you can go on the internet and find pictures of infernos, buildings that burnt for weeks and didn't fall.
So they're saying that debris from the other towers...
Yeah, residual effects, and I'm just assuming, I guess, like seismic activity from the collapsing of World Trade Centers 1 and 2 may have caused, I don't know, like an electrical thing to, you know what I mean, like some sort of destabilization. Yeah, like they were essentially saying like impacts from what had happened in World Trade Center 1 and 2 caused office fires that essentially weakened the structural steel of the building of World Trade Center 7 and caused it to collapse symmetrically into its own footprint at the rate of free fall speed. And those are the three incriminating things as engineers. We see red flags go right up, because right there you see this. The symmetry to me is the biggest one, because it's like try to get like something that was put together literally in a steel matrix to fall like symmetrically into its own footprint is one thing, and then to get it to do that without a single ounce of what would account for all of the resistance of it having to fall into itself and encounter the structural integrity of all the rest of the steel underneath it supporting its weight. Like, let's say you're at this floor that the office fires are hitting, and you're weakening this one floor, and you manage to get the floor to fail, which in my opinion is a long shot, because I mean, you watch me heat up titanium nails when I dab. They don't, steel and titanium don't they don't burn. They don't like, it's like wood, you know what I mean? Like they can turn red and they still have their structural integrity. That's the whole point of building buildings out of steel, is that they can't melt steel. Then if that is the structure that everything else is attached to, the building has structural integrity.
Well, right. I mean, how many office fires? I've heard of a lot of office fires. How many office fires have you ever heard of?
World Trade Center 7.
But I'm saying, how many office fires have you ever heard of besides World Trade Center 7 that caused the entire collapse of the building?
That was the first time in history that a building had collapsed due to fires. It had never happened before in history.
That's the first time
first time in history.
I gotta stop talking like Foghorn Leghorn. I don't know why I always stutter when I'm doing this.
Who cares?
I said. So that was really the first documented case of that happening?
It's never happened otherwise. Because, frankly, from an engineering perspective, it's impossible. Take as much fire as you want. Get a fucking flamethrower. Knock out some wall at like some industrial building somewhere and just go at the piece of steel with the flamethrower. You could sit there for hours with the flamethrower and just attack the shit out of it. It'll just get hot. It's not going to weaken enough to support the... And even if you could damage that one piece of steel or even an entire floor of steel, you have to understand that the entire structure of the building is a physical force matrix that is completely interconnected. All the forces are distributed evenly throughout all of the steel.
Like, it's designed to not do that.
Yeah, it's designed to not have a single point of failure or even a single, like, sector or section of failure. The whole thing is designed to have structural integrity within itself. Just like it's geometric precision. It's architecture.
Like a partial collapse would be far more likely than a complete collapse.
And if it was to be a complete collapse, the complete collapse would be asymmetrical. Like, let's say there was a huge failure in like a portion of the building. That weak portion would start the rest of the collapse to happen, but it would happen very asymmetrically. If it was on one side of the building, you would see it fall towards that side. The buildings fell straight down into their own footprint, which is actually the hardest way to fall, because you have to fall directly through the support lines of force that are coming back up from the rest of the fucking building.
What I would argue is this, though, and it's one of the questions I always had. If someone's gonna, like today, like demolish a skyscraper, it takes a significant amount of prep time to like set that all up. I mean, okay.
I'm so glad we're getting.
I'm glad because I'm
so glad we're getting into this.
Because I don't claim to be an expert, but these are just the questions that pop up in my mind. I'm sure others. I mean, again, this National Geographic documentary, like the guy was on that said that it takes him like a couple months to like completely get a building ready, like
ready for demolition. Yeah,
that size for demolition. Now, granted, I'm sure that if you were a surreptitious, I don't know, organization that's trying to commit a terrorist act, you're not going to follow all the steps that a proper demolition expert would. But that being said, this guy made it seem like it would be pretty hard to do it on the fly and do it without being noticed. It would require a lot of people, a lot of fucking explosives, a lot of shit like that. So what's the argument for how that could have happened in one of the busiest places in the world, essentially?
I love this. This is going to tie into everything else we want to talk about. So I always call 9/11, this is so funny, I call it the gift that keeps on giving, because it was the first thing that got me into truth conspiracy research. And as I moved forward, it just kept coming back to things, and I kept finding out more and more things about 9/11 that I didn't realize that were connected to deeper and deeper, more esoteric things that I had no idea about.
Okay.
So this thing in particular, the answer to your question is another example of that. So there's a doctor out there named Dr. Judy Hall who has tremendous research on what she thinks the method was used to destroy the World Trade Center towers.
Now, what kind of doctor is she?
I have no idea, and I'm not trying to defer to an authority here. And
no. I wanted to know only because I would assume that she would be some sort of...
It's something in
engineering or architect.
It's something in some sort of like physical science or something like that.
If she's even commenting on the subject, she would have to have some sort of credentials that way. But that's what I was asking. I'm sure if we can look it up.
Yeah, Dr. Judy Hall, you can vet yourself. Anything on this podcast, we espouse you to vet for yourself. The idea is to come to your own conclusions.
Right, and a lot of the conversations are off the cuff, so we might not have the references right on hand. But if anything that requires like a legitimate reference, we'll link in the description. And we have phones, we can kind of pull stuff up. But
yeah, so but to answer the question, so essentially, I'd found out about what she claims the methodology was in a completely different line of, I guess, conspiracy threads. The conspiracy threads about the California wildfires. A lot of people claim that those were made by what were called directed energy weapons. Have you ever heard that before?
No. So,
yeah, DEW, directed energy weapons. And what people were saying with these California wildfires were that entire houses were being destroyed, but the foliage and trees and bushes around the houses remained. There was these weird pictures of like entire house, like I'm talking about like surround like metals melted. There's no toilets, nothing. Houses are completely gone, but the trees around them are like green. So when I saw some of those pictures, that was interesting. And when you look into Tesla's work and how he talked about the quote unquote death ray, which is essentially just hypercharged magnetic frequencies that can actually destroy the structural integrity of like the molecular bonds of certain materials, depending on what frequencies we're tuned to. So Dr. Judy Hall believes that was what was done to the World Trade Centers. Essentially, the way to destroy it was to beam this resonant frequency to destroy the structural steel and actually destroy the material on a frequency level. And that's how they got it to collapse effortlessly, because they use this advanced technology that essentially allows you to dematerialize something by irradiating it with an electrical frequency that is essentially at the same frequency as it. And her evidence for this is that when you watch the World Trade Centers collapsing, the part that it's collapsing from, dust is like exploding outwards. You would expect it to be more like debris, like giant chunks of concrete all falling off and like different things. This stuff is literally, you watching it fall even after it explodes, and it's starting to it looks like it just turns into sand and just like smokes away. So she points to that as evidence of this is actually like what you would consider like microwave radiation, essentially hyper microwaving this shit out of existence. And that was a potential way they could have done it without having to do a crazy construction type thing. Or they could have done it in conjunction with like certain key bombs, because a lot of people report hearing explosives. There are a lot of eyewitnesses that have reported hearing like what amounts to explosions. But even so, like that directed energy weapons theory is a way that like I've heard explained by, and she's really smart, man. Like if you like listen to her, like she gets into like the technical details of how it works.
Where can we find
Just
her?
Google Dr. Judy Hall. Just look her up on YouTube. She's got plenty of videos. She just gives mad presentations on it. It's pretty interesting. But that's like a really sneaky esoteric thing that ties into Tesla, electromagnetic like reality truth about how material science is connected to electromagnetics, how matter is connected to electromagnetics, how consciousness is connected to that stuff.
Please go into it, because this is stuff that I'm very interested in, but I don't have the technical vocabulary to really either articulate it or even really understand it. So
this is stuff I try to talk to about with so many people, and I just like not many people have the taste for it. You know what I mean? Because it's technical as shit.
Well, you're a good person to take that technical jargon and then to like condense it to a conversation that a layman can have. So
appreciate that, man.
yeah. So shoot away. Like give me your spiel on Tesla.
All right, yo. So for anybody that doesn't know who Nikola Tesla is, which is very possible because he somehow is excluded from the educational curriculum of modern education.
Yeah, I don't really remember learning about him. I remember watching like maybe some History Channel documentaries in which he was mentioned, but not in
You don't
class.
learn about him in public school. He's not in textbooks. But if you look, he basically, as far as patents go and research, he's responsible for essentially all of modern electronics. Like, he basically came up with the entire concept of alternating current and created it in a way that we could use it.
Thomas Edison, by the way, who is credited for creating the light bulb and all these advances in, what would the field be considered?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Was primarily a salesman. I mean, he was a great salesman, and he really promoted said the light bulb, but also DC, direct current electricity, and is the primary reason why DC is what you use in your house, even though it's less safe.
Yeah.
But
DC is what's coming into your house, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that decision was made essentially on a government level.
Yeah.
Like there was a point in time in which Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison were like essentially lobbying
for each current.
And I mean, obviously Edison won out, but he wasn't. I'm not saying he wasn't like a scientific genius, but he wasn't the scientific. He was more of like a Steve Jobs, than a Albert Einstein.
Yeah,
and he was a genius in his way, and he understood the technology in a way that was advanced for his time. And I'm sure he knew what he was doing in an engineering sense.
Yeah,
but he had like a laboratory in which he had like workers working for him, and like he took credit for the discoveries of that lab.
Yeah,
and
the accomplishments of that lab.
So it's just a different. Whereas Nikola Tesla was more like this lone scientist,
literally like he would shut himself in his lab and just by himself for hours just do crazy shit. Apparently he could like visualize like things. He could work out inventions in his head. He was like the quote unquote mad scientist type, but in like the dopest way, like in like the sort of like I don't know, like what's an altruistic sort of like giving sense, where it's like use this technology in a philanthropic sense to sort of like give humanity access to energy so that we can pull ourselves into an area. Like, think about it. Access to energy would absolutely eradicate poverty.
Well,
if it could be achieved in the way that Tesla was working on it, as far as like being able to give it free to anyone,
and like over long distances wirelessly
yeah,
too. But
exactly.
Now, okay, but before we get ahead of ourselves, clearly I know a little bit more than I was letting on earlier, but it's not to the degree that Carmen can explain it. But okay, so we established that Tesla was a electrical engineer. What are some I guess, inventions or breakthroughs that we would know about in modern times that he was attributed to? So
Well, I can not only name them, but I can name the ones that were originally falsely attributed to other people. So, ironically, down the street from us, or where we grew up, is a place called Marconi Plaza. Do you know what Marconi's invention was initially supposed to be? What he invented, apparently?
the radio, right?
Yeah, and then it was later attributed to Tesla because they realized he figured it out first, and he had all these like documents proving that he figured out radio frequency because it's the most basic form of electrical frequency. It's the lowest wavelength you have, so it's like it's almost like where you start on the scale of like complexity when it comes to electrical engineering. So yeah, he developed that. He had developed LEDs, and this is all stuff that's documented. But what went undocumented is what I'm super interested in, stuff that's kind of on the fringe, and stuff that's still documented, like the Wardenclyffe Tower, for example, which was essentially like his free energy like masterpiece. Like this was a thing that could pull energy out of the earth, and it worked, and then it got shut down and destroyed.
Who shut it down?
JP Morgan, his financiers.
So what's the story? Like how Wardenclyffe Tower, that was in upstate New York, right?
Wardenclyffe. I think it's either Wardenclyffe or Widecliff. I don't know. I can't remember.
I thought it was Wycliffe.
It's one of those. I can't remember.
But it was. I believe it was in upstate New York, right?
Yeah. And a lot of weird shit like that took place in New York. All the weird electrical engineering stuff took place in New York. Long Island, all sorts of weird shit.
Yeah, weird shit. Our ex-partner's from New York. If there's any coincidence in that. But I kid, Pat. I kid. But so he's in upstate New York. He creates this device that's able to pull energy from the ground and
essentially function the same way as if you watch our interview with Brian Forrester. We talk about how the pyramids were like energy conduits, essentially like concentrating it to a point up top. And then if you look at it, it's like kind of like a pyramid shaped like oil rig looking thing with a fucking little dome on top. And the dome is essentially like where all the energy got concentrated to, and then it's fired out into like the reason why it's built so high is because that area of the atmosphere, it's easier for electrical current to travel because it's less dense.
But how can you transfer energy though? Like how can you transfer energy, and how can you do that safely? Like how could that pass?
So this is actually
space?
this is so cool. This is like one of the coolest ways that Tesla showed how we can safely transport energy. So this goes back to that DC versus AC thing that was going on back in those propaganda days when they were trying to win out. This is how Tesla sort of like made himself more of like a magician and less of just like an engineer. You know, he sort of like walked that line between like, I don't know, like transdimensional spiritual like genius and like electrical inventor. But like he did this whole demonstration where he like essentially created these plasma, like he essentially created a lightning storm inside of a theater, but he figured out how to tune electricity to frequencies that were harmonious with the human body. So he essentially electrocuted himself in front of people, like straight up just shocked himself, and like just like was fine because it was frequencies that just traveled through. It didn't create any like resistance or whatever, and it was like, I guess I forget what it was called, but like it's these kind of frequencies that heal you. The same thing with that Tesla shit that we radiated. Remember when we went to Acapulco the first time and I got radiated with those little discs?
Yes.
It's like similar technology, but imagine those things are like sparking and creating lightning waves.
Is that in the vault too, or do we have that?
That is posted.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
That is posted live. So you can go check. It's called Tesla Technology Rediscovered in Acapulco 2018. That's a good one.
We have a lot. Speaking of the vault, we have a lot of shit in the vault.
Let's touch on that.
That's a term we just friggin' started. We coined it like 2 days ago.
I love it, bro, because we literally have like, I got a hard drive filled with like all the extra footage we got from multiple different conferences that never came out because we were like planning our own conference and making documentaries for people. And it got pushed to the wayside. So now we're in a position where we're doing this podcast weekly, and we just have not only all the content from all that stuff that never got released, but then all the new stuff that came from when we shot all the speeches and all the stuff in Arkadelphia. So we just literally have a vault of footage that just needs to be edited by myself and hopefully a few other editors one day. Because right now we're just bootstrapping, but I kind of love it, dude. I don't know. I kind of love being able to just be like the fountain of creativity. You know what I mean? Like with this podcast and with that kind of stuff, it's rewarding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even though we haven't released a lot of the videos specifically from Anarchadelphia, they're all on YouTube. So if anybody wants to go out there and watch them and just get the content, it's available. What's the guy's name? I know his real name's
I forget his real name, but his YouTube is the Gas Man.
The Gas Man. I think his real name is Tim. But
he's cool. He preserved it so if you need that information, you can get it right away. We have all the cameras, all the pro audio. We just have to edit up and make it into essentially our little masterpiece because that's what Anarchadelphia was for us, man. It was like
who do we got in the vault? Like what people. What interviews do we have lined up? Because we have a lot.
All right, so Richard Gage was one. So literally this whole 9/11 discussion, like once that comes out, like literally you're talking to like the head engineer. So me and him get to have a great discussion about all of this, all of the incriminating factors about the quote unquote impossible physics behind 9/11.
Did we released the Vaxxed guy, right?
Yep, Del Bigtree came out. You did a dope interview with the QAnon. This guy was big on QAnon that I think is going to come out soon.
Right. I discussed QAnon with a guy who he contributed to a book about QAnon, and he his focus was more on the like social media implications of it or something. But
yeah.
I would say I just kind of challenged some of his views on it.
It was a cool discussion, man.
I'm not convinced that that's real. I looked at some of this QAnon shit, and it seems to me like, first of all, anything that he or she or they post is like so cryptic that it always seems to require like an intermediary to explain exactly what it really means.
Yeah, and
everything that they say is so general. Like I don't want to. When we release it, the example that is used is what was it? He said that Q like made a claim that something was going to happen like in a country, all right, and then like something happened in that country, but like shit happens in every country all the time, and like I mean,
yeah, that's what you kept going back to. You're like, well, this also happened like in some other place that was like kind of common.
Yeah, like it's just connecting the dots where I don't see the
and like the whole thing with the Q is like, oh, Trump's the pedophile hunter, the vampire slayer. He's gonna get all the evil pedos in Congress, and then Jeffrey Epstein dies under his watch on like federal property in federal custody. The big bad demon slayer catches the ultimate prize and just accidentally lets him kill himself.
I mean, I don't know.
And it also is friends with him. So like yeah, like it's less about. I have less of a disagreement with Q as far as like the way that they say that they are getting their information more than I have with the actual implications of what they think the information they're getting is implying. I just can't see Trump as being the savior of the world, and that seems to be all the Q people like. That seems to be like the conclusion of the whole thing. You know what I mean?
I guess, and I haven't seen anything that convinced me that this person is worth even paying a fucking attention to.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems, I believe, and my friend Dom, I mean, not that he listens to the podcast, but I have a friend Dom who's very, very much an advocate of Q, and he's going to get mad at me for this, but I think he's a fucking cosplayer, you know what I mean, or a role player. I think he's some guy that got a following that's like, oh shit, like people are, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but nothing that anyone has shown me, and nothing that I've come across in my own research seemed like information that someone on the inside of the government could only know. Like it's always cryptic. It's always vague enough that like it can be interpreted in multiple ways. It's kind of like John Edwards. You know what I mean? You know the guy John Edwards, the fucking like Crossing Over with John Edwards. He does like the medium cold readings. He like goes into a room. And he's just like, I'm getting a sense. I'm feeling someone, a J, like a J name, like a John, a Joe, a Jerry. My uncle, my husband's name was Jerry, a Jerry, and I'm getting that Jerry, that he passed, and we weren't really ready for it. I mean, like it's shit like that. Like
Yeah,
I mean, well, it was kind of sudden. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's called cold readings. You kind of fish. You kind of say things general enough that people can kind of read into it, and then you kind of refine it and like get more specific. It seems like that's what QAnon's doing. It's just like it's like an old con tactic where he just says something vague enough that like when something happens, like
they can point to that.
They point to that, and then he like even like then he starts like go like he already has something to work off of, so now he can act like he's like got this inside knowledge and say some like unverifiable stuff, which again it's cryptic enough that like you can take it in multiple ways regardless of what he says. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a mole in the government that's really trying to release this, but if that's the case, I feel like there would be more effective ways to do it than like pandering to a very esoteric like group of 4chaners or Redditors or where the hell does he even go on? I don't even know where this shit. I mean, I've looked at. I've been sent links and stuff. I forget like the websites that he's on, but like I don't know. Like, what's the point? What is the point? Just so a couple fucking just so Trump supporters can like be like, I told you so. Like after when Donald Trump does this. I mean, I don't. What is the point?
Yeah, I don't know. It's confusing to me too, and yeah, it doesn't seem to be the best way to get that kind of secret information out. What was a very efficient way was the method that Julian Assange had, but we all saw how that worked out. Right. That actually got 50,000 Hillary Clinton emails out that had implications to like essentially references to pedophile terms and pedophile symbology.
Listen, Greta Thunberg is the person of the year or whatever. I mean, I think Julian Assange should be person of the year every fucking year.
Yeah.
For what he's done and the amount of classified information that the public really did have a right to know and was not privy to, that he facilitated the release of. He is, first of all, I mean, even before he was recently taken into custody, he's been in prison for the last, 5 years or something like that? Like
he's in like an embassy.
Right, he was in a couple. He was like confined to a few rooms in an embassy, and I don't know. I guess that's just like a well furnished prison. I mean, that's not exactly the way I'm sure he wanted to live his life, and I don't know. I mean, I get why they're going after him, and I get why they have to like make an example out of him, of course. But it should be outrage. You should be outraged about it. Just same. Also, Eric Snowden.
Yeah,
Eric Snowden is a person who I disagree with politically. He's like a very adamant Bernie Sanders supporter and stuff. But that aside, I mean, that's irrelevant. He's one of the bravest men I can think of. I mean, he literally threw his life away to reveal some. Chelsea Manning is another one who, again, like, say what you want about her politics or her choice to become a woman, but that being said, like, she spent years in prison to do the right thing and to release information that showed, the misuse of force by American forces in Iraq. So, I mean, I'm kind of like ranting right now, but
no, it's all relevant, man.
I think that it's why did I start talking about this? I really just drew a blank. I got so like taken away by these guys. I just feel these people are. I mean, Chelsea Manning's released, but Eric Snowden has
Julian Assange. They're all Julian Assange is in like a bad critical health condition or something.
Yeah,
he might not be long for this world either. Here's another person mysteriously like dying once they get in custody of the government.
Eric Snowden had to take refuge in fucking Russia. I mean, of all places, I mean, that's true. Again, the Russian government's just as fucked up as any other government, and I'm sure they're doing it for like selfish political reasons. But that just shows the degree of that. I don't know. That just shows you how fucked up the U.S. government is, I guess, because this guy should be considered a national hero, and he risks being charged with treason if he steps foot on home soil again.
Yeah, like you want to talk about a patriot, like for those who are patriotic, like you know what I mean, like those types, like the rah rah, like they get excited when like the song comes on before the sport came.
But what do they say though? But these people always use these like buzz terms to justify their patriotism, freedom, liberty. You know, these principles that are supposed to be inherent to Americans. They should be inherent to all human beings, but like America makes the claim as the champion of these ideals. This is a person who, first of all, I don't know if you know this, he wasn't even a government worker at the time that he revealed all this information about what the hell was the program called? Is it Spectrum?
No, that's awesome that you said Spectrum, though, because it's so close to what it is.
It's something like that.
I know what it is.
Oh
I already know what it is. I'm about to say it, but I just love that you chose the word Spectrum because it's like so. It sounds phonetically like it, and it also like weirdly is like a similar thing. It's Prism.
Prism.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spectrum, Prism. They're both sort of like weirdly like dopes, like similar terms.
Well, Prism,
Yeah.
which was an NSA program that essentially aggregated email metadata and stuff, but
all metadata. It was basically full scale like aggregation of every like data point on all the public to get essentially a thing of it. And like think about what a prism is. Like it's essentially like, you know what I mean? Like a prism that like you would break light up in is essentially like, think about the cover of the Pink Floyd album. That is a prism. You know what I mean? So like it's essentially like the splitting of information from the infinity of the white light into the colors of the organized rainbow. So like they're taking the infinity of all the data and splitting it into this like, you know what I mean?
They're
like,
good with their code words. Their code. They really are. I'll give it to them.
It's fucking crazy.
But
dude.
right. I mean, that's it. But that was an example of the government spying on its own citizens. And by the way, to my original point, he was not a government worker. He was actually a contractor. He worked for a company called was it Booz Allen Klein? I think it's called. I'm gonna look. It's Booz Allen Klein. Yes, it's a they're essentially a PIA, a private intelligence agency. The
business of just like what private spies. What are they? A private eye. Private Snow.
Booz Allen Hamilton.
Okay.
Excuse me. I knew that. Okay. Booz.
So they were a contractor for the NSA, right? That's the story?
Yes. But that's essentially they were. He was a I don't know if he was like a cybersecurity guy or he was some sort of. I mean, he worked on computers and he was doing something for them, but they were being contracted by the government, which kind of really shows you how the system kind of works. Like it's we're at the point where like the corruption's like contracted out.
Yeah,
in a weird way.
It totally is.
I mean, it's how
everything is, even the roads.
Well, it's how, in my opinion, because Booz Allen Klein was founded by a former CIA. I don't know if it was a director or something, like a high, maybe not director, but like a high-ranking CIA agent. And
so it's like the revolving door thing.
Well, exactly. It's how people stay in power without technically being in power.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this, it's the revolving door. It's the fact that like the contractors that are the same people that are in government or the same people that are, you know,
lobbying for whatever law that supports whatever contractor's like agenda.
Exactly. It's like a circle jerk. And
so then business becomes who can manipulate the government to support your essentially, you know, models and agenda rather than who can provide the best product. That's the perversion.
And also,
right there.
I don't know. I know this is an anarchist podcast, but I don't know if I feel comfortable with the government contracting that fucking shit out. I mean, either don't do it, or I mean, I don't know. I mean,
no, yeah, it's like if it's gonna be your responsibility, shouldn't you do it? Like,
right?
Shouldn't you be fully responsible for the thing and not just like pay somebody else to like, okay, hopefully they do it right. Hopefully this private intelligence agency spies on people right.
Yeah, there's no conflict of interest. Let's create a multi-billion-dollar industry that gets directly related to like defense policy, and I'm sure it'll have no corrupting effects. But yeah, so he's a hero. Snowden, Assange, Manning. I mean, these are people that should be recognized. Fucking Greta Thunberg. I mean, it's easy to like shit on this kid, and I'm not even trying to like be mean. But what is her contribution? Well, you know what I'll say, honestly. You know who else was a Time Magazine Person of the Year? True story. Adolf Hitler.
And Joseph Stalin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Both of them. I didn't know which one you were going to say. I knew you were going to say one of those, but I didn't know which one it was going to be.
Clearly, they don't have the best track record. And it's more of a... Again, I'm not comparing her to Hitler, but it's clearly more of a popularity contest at the time than it is like a true consideration of the most impactful person on the planet. Like, there's fucking protesters in Hong Kong right now who are being killed, who are fighting off the authorities with bows and arrows. I don't know if you know about this or not. Do you know what's going on in Hong Kong?
Yeah, dude. Basically, it's almost like a hostile takeover of Hong Kong by the Chinese like way of life, right?
Well, essentially, prior to 1997, Hong Kong was governed by the British. It was a colony that was Hong Kong as a city was established by the British. It didn't exist before the British established it.
What was it? Just some like land?
It was an island. It was like a sparsely populated island.
Interesting.
It doesn't have many natural resources. That's why it's like a financial and business hub.
Yeah.
But
same with Japan. Weird.
So in 1997, they transferred power over to the Chinese government because of a previous agreement that was I think they had a lease that was like a 99-year lease or whatever the hell it was, and the system that but again, this was after the Communist Party took control of Hong Kong, but this was after decades of essentially democracy and
being Western
and being westernized and having free market capitalism, stuff like that. So they established something called one party, two systems, or one country, two systems, one party, two systems, or whatever. If you look into Chinese politics, they have a lot of these really weird, like fucking policies that have like these titles, like these like very ambiguous or like contradictory titles. But the system would be essentially what they were saying was that they would allow Hong Kong to kind of govern themselves internally, and they would control like external affairs. Like they wouldn't be able to have like a military and stuff, but they would retain the rights and privileges that they previously had. Over the past 20 years since that's happened, those rights have been slowly eroded. And the Chinese government has been exerting more power. They've been getting more politics. Again, it's why politics is the root of all evil. They've been getting more politicians. They've in Hong Kong's government to support China, like more Chinese influence. So they're kind of like voting themselves into this situation,
just infesting.
And what ended up happening was the Hong Kong government passed a law that would allow Chinese officials to like come in and extradite Hong Kong citizens or extradite people from Hong Kong. Like right now at this point, if you want to travel from mainland China to Hong Kong, you need a visa.
No, I actually have done this, so I can comment on this. It's actually fucking nuts. It's essentially like immigrating into another country. Like when I came because we came into mainland China and flew out of Hong Kong. So in order to just fly out of Hong Kong, we had to essentially immigrate. You know what I mean? We had to like cross the border into essentially what felt like another country. It had a different currency. It had a different currency than the rest of China.
Well, let me ask you this: how would you compare the two? Because I've heard that they're starkly different.
It's insanely different. And listen, I was only in I think I was really only in we drove into just like the airport. So I really just drove through it. But I went through the entire rest of China. Like I'll tell you the exact route. We flew into Shanghai, which is like kind of on the east coast of China. And then like we went up to Beijing, which is like north mainland, and then kind of went south all the way down towards Hong Kong, hitting stops along the way. This is when I toured in a fucking crazy rock band. And when I was in like Shanghai and some of these other cities, like I was like horrified at like how like just insane everything was. Like it was just like it just felt like an industrial wasteland. You know what I mean? Like everything was like hyper crammed, packed, crappy shit. Like I don't know, just like everything was just like barely held together. Do you know what I mean? But also like insanely like mass produced at the same time. You know what I mean? It was like the worst combination of the two. And then you get to Hong Kong and everything's like beautiful, glorious, like, you know, beautiful architecture, beautiful, just like, I don't know, city planning, I guess you could say. And like all the personalities are different. The people's attitudes are different. It was like starkly different. It was crazy.
Listen, I've been watching a lot of videos by these two guys. One's Laoway86 and the other one's Serpenza, I believe. They're two, one's I think South African, the other one's American, but they're two people that lived in China for over a decade. One of them's, I think Serpenza is still there, and the other one lived there for about 15 years, and Serpenza was there for around the same time. And it is, it's a scary place, man. I
didn't feel comfortable, dude. I didn't feel safe.
At least from their perspective, and especially being a foreigner there. I know there was a story of a guy who was living in China, a Westerner, and he got into some sort of like fight in a bar. Like, guy started throwing beer at him or something. Like, it was apparently being a foreign. It's so rare to see white people in China that they make people kind of make a big deal and almost like harass you.
Yeah.
So I guess he turned down a drink from these people, and they started a fight with him, and one of them got hurt, and they ended up being kind of connected people, and he's doing like. They sentenced him to 7 years in prison in China. And then they commuted it to like 3 or something. But still, I mean, Jesus Christ.
Jesus,
for a fist fight, you know?
Wow.
And Serpenza talks about a story that he was coming out of like a massage parlor, and there was like a dispute over like money, and a crowd of Chinese people like just beat him up. Like, the guy was like this. Like, the guy had an argument, and he called him, like, a name. And the guy was like, did you hear what he just said about all Chinese people? And then they just jumped him. And then but,
what was scary about it to me was driving around seeing, like, the government buildings were essentially giant plots of land with one building in the middle that was, like, a nice big, like, rectangular skyscraper. And then just, like, what essentially amounted to like the giant like death court that if you tried to run from that building you would die on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere to hide and there's nowhere to like approach it from. So like if you tried to cross the barrier between the fence and the building, or you tried to leave that barrier, you weren't getting out alive either way.
But Hong Kong is supposed to be much better. I mean, the crime rate is famously low there. They have a pretty high like per capita income, pretty high, you know, whatever the hell, like happiness index kind of metrics. Like they like the system that they have. They like being in control of their own sovereignty, and they're not taking it laying down. And I think the fact that Time Magazine didn't make them the people of the year or whatever, and made Greta Thunberg, really shows the priorities. And it's just the fact that, listen, if the Hong Kong protesters were more popular, Time Magazine might go with them, but they're not. They really don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They know that this kid who is commenting on complex like climate model science, like she's an expert, is worth this accolade, as opposed to like people that are literally fighting for their lives and freedom.
And here's a touch of irony on this whole situation. Her solution to this is, you know, essentially, you know, expand government, you know, add taxes, and
isn't like, it always?
And the ironic thing is, like, if you go to China where they have like communist like tax laws and stuff like that, or communist like, you know, ideologies like that, it's got the worst environment that you could possibly go in. Right. I never felt more in like the air quality there was so horrifyingly awful. You couldn't see buildings because there was so much smog.
That's why people got the problem is government. The problem.
Yeah. So like you want the solution to climate change is to make the world more like China, and that's going to make the environment better. That's essentially Greta Thunberg's plan of action. And here's what, honestly, this is what's so disingenuous about that whole thing, which makes me just want to really just like, I don't know, like not pull punches when it comes to this girl. The whole fact that they leave out two very important things, one being the most important. they leave out geoengineering. She never talks about that. The whole fact that they're talking about how they're spraying the skies now. She doesn't even talk about that and how that relates to this whole quote unquote climate change thing. And two, they don't talk about how this whole Tesla free energy thing. Like if we get back to that and we get back to, hold on, wait a second. We don't need any of this quote unquote dirty fuel, which if you look into that, that's even questionable. But let alone the fact that we can use electricity and power generators that can sit on people's tables to power cities from essentially what is the quantum vacuum of energy that we all draw energy from. Like it completely makes the environmental disasters that we are causing unnecessary.
But why are you positive that this technology exists and is able to be, I guess, used in this way? I mean, I understand that Tesla had his lab and supposedly that was the discovery that he made, but like, do you? I mean, I'm not saying this in a because I think I know the answer. I'm saying it honestly. Like, what makes you so certain that this technology is currently being hidden from us, and that like someone has access to it and is like withholding it?
Well, of multiple things. So to start, the fact that Tesla, with the Wardenclyffe or the Wycliffe Tower, that's proof of concept of this stuff working. Well, as far as him actually being able to generate this stuff. Then you get into like modern day scientists who are like, they put this stuff out there, some of them, and like you see these generators, and it's pretty crazy. They turn the thing on. There's electric meters measured to the output. The thing is starting to spin itself. You can see it. It makes this crazy noise. It works exactly how the Tesla motor should work, and you see it's generating more and more output. So that's an over unity device. So I've seen these things working I've seen proof of concept. So once you have proof of concept, then it just becomes an implementation process. And the other proof of concept, ironically, is the pyramids of Egypt, if you want to get into that. The ancient civilizations of the past essentially used pyramids for the same end, to do this free energy transmission, because they were highly advanced technologically as well. So that's another little anecdote to this whole thing.
Well, let's go over then. I mean, we've talked to Brian Forrester, who's pretty big on this kind of stuff. So what is the... And I want to also get to geoengineering as well, because you mentioned that.
It's all connected, man.
Well, listen, geoengineering, all I know is this. I'm not as familiar with it as you are, but I do know that I watched a YouTube video that was put out, and it was a demonstration by the U.S. military that created a rain cloud.
It's relatively simple. It's not that hard.
And sent it out miles away, and it was like a legitimate rain cloud. I mean, I don't know, that really blew my mind that was even possible. Yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, you can do it a couple ways. You can introduce, like, there's crude ways to do it, where, like, introducing different densities. But then there's something to do with, like, again, it all comes back to electricity. If you can do something with, like, you can hyper concentrate electrical energy in a certain area, you can get certain molecules to bond, you can get things to move around, and more importantly, if you inject certain conductive material into these things via spraying things out of planes, then you can run frequencies through this conductive material and activate these frequencies and blast these frequencies, especially if this conductive material gets inside of your body. Then you become essentially a host for certain waves, like, let's say, a fifth generation of technology, microwave.
I mean, we're all over the place, but yeah, 5G, that's another...
Well, I'm just trying to show the connection between all that stuff.
There's so many interesting things I want to talk about. But I mean, and it is all kind of connected. So...
But yeah, Greta Thunberg thinks that a carbon tax is going to solve the issue.
Right. I mean, listen, it's... I don't know. I don't know how to solve climate change or where the hell... I don't even know what that is or what that means, because it seems like all the models that they put out are never actually accurate. I mean, according to Al Gore, we should be pretty close to the end times right now.
There's articles from like the 70s talking about how like in 10 years it's over. You know what I mean? Like,
so, I mean, it's always 10 years away, it seems.
Yeah, it's been a decade away for like 3 decades.
Right. It's always 10 years away. So, I mean, at the very least...
And we're not trying to say that humans don't pollute the environment. That's not what we're saying.
I'm not even saying that it's impossible that, like, humans are making the environment warmer. I don't know. Mm-hmm. My point is that at the very least, their predictions have not been accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
At the very least, the models and predictions that they've presented to us as if it was gospel have not come to fruition. And maybe, in in 10 years we're gonna be fucking up to our necks in seawater and we're all gonna be salty about it. But no pun intended. But it seems like they always have a convenient enough space in between like their predictions that like in between them they could slide in like a new updated prediction that just like kicks the can down the road.
Yep, and then just pop the legislation in every couple of years.
Right, just give me more money. More money. What do we do about all the? We have a complex climate issue that involves thousands of factors and
in multiple countries
and multiple countries and what do we do? Money. Give me money. It's really just, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a disingenuous way. She wants to like eliminate like plastic and I mean, how about did you hear about the Green New Deal? You know what that is?
I've heard of it. What can you elaborate?
Do you know who Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is?
What's her nickname? AOC?
Yeah.
She's like the fucking socialist like hero, right?
Yeah, she's a congresswoman out of the Bronx and she's pretty young. She's like our age. Mm-hmm. She's 29 or I don't think she's 30. And she proposed something called the Green New Deal that was it was like probably the most extreme piece of legislation ever presented to, or at least in recent times. I mean, it advocated like the elimination of almost all like airplane travel and like shit like that. Like it was meant to drastically reduce our carbon emissions and stuff like that. And here's the thing, man. Fossil fuels are not all bad. I mean, I like the fact that I have a car. I mean, I think that like maybe there are more efficient technologies out there, but it's not because that there's one evil technology and then like a good technology. I mean, every technology has its appropriate usage. And I think the fact that government is so intrinsically tied into the petroleum extraction,
even car
industry.
Manufacturing, everything's so standardized. You can't go off on tangents. You can't there's not modding of engines to make them different like that. That's so difficult to do. You have to find specialists.
That's what I mean. Like, I think it's just an entrenched system that when government gets involved, they just make it that much more stagnant and hard to change.
Exactly. They impede progress and ingenuity. You know what I mean?
Like even like ethanol. Like they made a big push for ethanol.
Yeah.
And it just fucked up like the farm economy.
Yeah.
And really didn't do anything for. I mean, apparently the fucking icebergs are still melting. So
climate change is still just as dangerous as ever. It's just another failed scheme that didn't change anything.
But now
right?
farmers just get to have like an extra subsidy,
Yeah. To grow what? Corn?
Yeah, to make ethanol. So it's creating, whether intended or unintended, it's creating, effects downstream, which now farmers who may be growing other probably more healthy crops are growing corn for ethanol because they're being subsidized by the government. So why the fuck would they not?
I want to invent a term. You know how they always talk about like trickle down economics? I want to talk about like trickle down politics, where we, the government does something like an ethanol thing, and the trickle down politics effect is that it has this like awful effect on the farm economy, where like everybody starts growing corn instead. Or in the case of Venezuela, where they mandate that corn has to be $5 and nobody wants to sell it for $5, everybody stops growing corn. Just different forms of trickle down politics, and how it just impedes the natural equilibrium that people find just by interacting with each other. You know what I mean?
And know what it is, man? It's the fact that people really do believe that, like, if it was just me making the decisions,
I could do it.
Everyone else was a bad guy or was incompetent or was corrupt, but me or my guy or my candidate or the person I support, they're the one. No, it's the fact that the government is absolutely incapable of accomplishing any of the things they claim they can accomplish. They're inept. They cannot perform the tasks that they set out to perform. And it's because the incentives are all fucking wrong. It's because you have people using other people's money to address issues that don't really affect them. So there's like zero incentive for financial considerations. There's zero incentive for actual results. Exactly. I mean, go to fucking DMV. Could you imagine a private, like, I mean, I don't know.
Imagine a restaurant that operated like a DMV.
Imagine, there's some places, like, I guess UPS isn't like a pleasant experience, but the DMV is like, I mean, it's inhumane what you actually have to go through. It's absolutely a crime against humanity. Like, the amount of fucking time they steal from your life, and in a process that could be so streamlined. I mean,
you take a picture and print a piece of paper out.
I mean, with fucking modern technology and computers, and like, you really need to fucking get a piece of paper printed from one desk and then like wait an hour to get it stamped at another. Like, that needs to happen now in 2020 or whatever, 2019, almost 2020. It's because the fact that they don't give a fuck. The DMV doesn't care about customer service. You know, they got their job no matter what.
Yeah.
They're not getting, I mean, we're paying them, but we don't got a choice.
That money is guaranteed because it's coming out of our pockets by force. That's like the ethos of this podcast, like the whole anarcho-capitalist theme of like, stop stealing shit from people and repurposing it for inefficient means that don't produce the results that they set out to produce.
To backtrack a little bit, I want to talk about the pyramids and the conversation you had with Brian Forrester.
Awesome.
So why don't you give a little summary of that conversation and tell us about Brian Forrester? And I suggest all you guys go back and watch the interview. It's dope as fuck.
Brian is spelled Brien, not A-N. And Forster. Brian Forrester, the man. The conversation that we had, it was funny how it happened. Ironically, Mike Martin, who was brought up on this last podcast, was the sole reason for that conversation. He was at an Acapulco, and he was like, bro, you gotta interview this guy, Brian Forrester. He's crazy. He talks about all this stuff. And I was familiar with the content of Brian Forrester's work, but I wasn't familiar with him as a researcher. And he basically travels all around to lost ancient civilization, monolithic structures, and megaliths, and studies them. But he studies them from the perspective of, well, put it this way, from a perspective that modern academia would not entertain.
Right. His research is rejected by mainstream academics.
Yeah.
And he's essentially, would he be considered an archaeologist?
Yep, he's an archaeologist.
Or an anthropologist. I don't know what his technical training is.
I would say an archaeologist.
But he's a researcher, and he travels to distant parts of the world. I thought it was really interesting when he went to South America and showed us some of the pictures of the, I guess what he claimed were I guess, structures created for giants or created by giants. I mean, I don't know if I believe that or not, but that's what his claim was. And some of the things he showed us, like these stone carved, essentially chairs or throne looking things that like a huge person would have to sit in.
Yeah,
like things like that. We're really interested. It's a very interesting topic to entertain.
Yeah, the whole pyramids thing, all the megalithic structures, it just points to a giant, like, gaping paradox, a huge syntax error in the traditional mainstream historical paradigm.
It's a good way to put it.
That's why nobody wants to touch it, because that, again, it always has to do with the implications. It's not that people care about Jeffrey Epstein and the guards. It's they care about the implications of what that means for like the Clinton regime. You know what I mean? And everybody else that's connected to it. Just like people don't want to touch this other thing because they don't want to deal with the implications of what it means for the historical paradigm.
Well, there's a lot of people whose entire careers, I'm sure, based upon certain theories about history. There's
an entire academic accreditation system that's based on it,
that
too.
This would completely, if this were to be true, would completely negate a lot of that, or a lot of, I guess, lauded academics.
It would absolutely eradicate them.
So you could definitely understand why there would be a little bit of a trepidation by mainstream academia to accept this, but it's what was he? One thing I found really interesting, which again, this is a claim that I can't verify because I'm not an expert, but he claimed to show us these drill marks essentially in in stone that could only have been used by like only could have been created by highly advanced tools. That there were these drill marks in these South American ruins.
It was either South American or I think those might have been at Giza, the drill marks.
Maybe, okay. But it's been a while since we had that conversation.
It's all in the interview. It's a great conversation. Again in Acapulco, the fucking best place for crazy people like that.
Listen,
to talk about awesome shit.
It's awesome. Fucking come. Daryl Hutchins, you're invited.
You're invited. I know you think it sucks, but it's actually awesome. So yeah, Mike Martin introduced me to him. We start talking. He tells me about all the research that he's doing and about how like basically like you can tell, again, it goes back to the engineering, that these kind of structures were built in harmony with the natural physics of reality. So to build something that big and then to build it to a scale that harmonizes with the natural frequencies such as like phi and pi and the golden ratio and all that and the golden mean, that is an engineering feat beyond anything we can possibly imagine. To even get that damn structure up and running, to even look like a pyramid is one thing. To have it aligned true north, south, east, and west, and to be built to the proportions of the golden ratio, like for example my guitar neck is fucking insane to think about from an engineering perspective. And to think that they say that slaves did this. So think about that. They're essentially saying that the DMV did that.
Well, not that this negates anything you said, but I took a class in college in which they, and I also watched a few documentaries in which they make the claim that the slave idea may not have been correct. Mm-hmm. Like every citizen of ancient Egypt was required to, as like in terms of like, as their form of taxation, was required to give work to the pharaoh.
So they essentially like the entire citizenry was like a labor force.
So they were like, like every citizen was like compulsed to work for like a certain amount of time for the government. So that is like, I mean, essentially slaves. I mean, they didn't have a choice in the matter. Yeah. But it's just like a little bit different narrative than you think of like the ancient like Jewish slaves.
Yeah, being like hit with like a whip and shit.
Yeah, like, I think it was a little different, but I find it interesting how, first of all, how they were able to accomplish that with ancient technology. I mean, if you look at illustrations and models of how they did it, they claim they did it with like sleds and just human.
They built a giant ramp. That's what Brian Forster said. They built a ramp out of like sand to actually get the wedges up. To, like once they started getting higher.
Yeah,
they just built sand ramps on it. So if you can picture how that looks.
I mean, that's
a bunch of people like pushing sand up to make like a firm thing that you're gonna slide like a 3,000 ton block on and get it aligned to true north.
And what is the deal with the astrological significance of, or astronomy?
No, that's right. Astrological significance of why they're like lined up with Orion's belt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because again, they were built in harmony with the earth and the heavens. The whole concept of the whole theory behind all of this is the reason these things are built is because they are essentially energy conduits that channel natural energies from like the earth and the universe through the pyramids and into the area, and especially in those resonance chambers that wherever those you know how there's like chambers that you can go into, those are sacred, those are special geometric points along these lines where, you know, some of them would claim to have had spiritual experiences. That's where you get the hieroglyphs of all these people talking about, you know, people saying they're talking to aliens or whatever, they you know, people coming from above, when in reality what I think they were doing was they were having like psychedelic experiences by being subjected to like highly like volatile, essentially metaphysical energy coming from the earth, being conduited through the conductivity of these pyramids, both through the geometric and the material conductivity. So I know that's a lot, but that's what Brian Forster talks about. I mean, he talks about how these things are energy conduits and how like it proves that they didn't have stupid levers and like the engineering feat itself basically, like it's the red herring that points to the fact that these civilizations were not only advanced but most likely more advanced technologically and otherwise than we are currently. That's the conclusion of it all, which is really interesting to me to think about.
It is interesting, and I mean, again, this is now I'm putting my like conspiracy theory hat on, but if we accept that notion, I mean, it's not out of the range of I guess, normal human behavior to like understand why someone could want to hide that information too. Like if you like, imagine if you're making the argument that they had this kind of advanced technology and this advanced understanding about like electromagnetism and shit, then logic would dictate that they would also understand radio frequencies and, you know, what you call it, line of sight communication and friggin' long distance communications or whatever the case may be. Like they clearly would, if they were advanced enough to create a megalithic structure, they probably figured that shit out too. You know, FM radio and stuff, or AM radio.
Exactly.
So, like, I'm writing like a little, like I'm writing a novel, and it's kind of premised a little bit on this, but or on this concept. But like, imagine how powerful like you would be if you were a member of an elite group that was able to have instantaneous like communications across the world with like other elite people, like in a time where literally news spread as fast as like a horse's legs could carry it. You know? Like it's really interesting, and a really interesting concept. And I think that I suggest anybody not only just watch our interview with Brian Forrester, but look into his work specifically. He's got some fascinating photographs and some fascinating documentary work himself, in which he just really explains his theories and lays it out. And anything we talk about, I encourage you guys to look up, whether it's we're talking about 9/11 stuff or fucking Greta Thunberg. Like, make, fact check us. And if we ever get anything wrong, make sure to comment it, because we don't want to, put out false information. But
it's funny how all this stuff ties back into Anarchapulco. Like, all these interviews we keep mentioning have to do with that conference and the people we met there.
Now that we're talking about Anarchapulco, we can mention, I think, what I'm the most excited about in terms of our endeavor with the Anarchapulco experience. It's going to be called Anarchapulco Fight Club. And by the way, for the record, Michael, tell me if I'm saying this right now. Nimitz. Michael Nimitz.
I believe that's how it says.
is wrong. Nimitz is right. I think that was like the name of a tank or something, or a plane or something. Some fucking machine of war was a Nimitz. But Michael Nimitz proposed this amazing idea, which is Anarchapulco Fight Club. And this is something where we can get some participation from you guys too, in terms of suggestions for topics or whatever. But we would essentially get members of either, the Anarchapulco community. I mean, we haven't really decided who exactly it is. We don't want it just to be speakers. We want it to be like,
it could be anybody. Anybody who could represent the point.
And we're explain it to them. Explain.
We'll essentially have, like, there are hot debates in this anarchist topic right now. You got the vaxxers versus the anti-vaxxers. You got the vegans versus the non-vegans. You got the flat earthers versus the globe earthers. And there's much more than that. And what better way to enjoy the Anarchapulco experience than to have people who are, at the heart or for the same purpose, because we're all anarchists here, we're all about peace and love, but mentally are completely diametrically opposed because of completely, opposite opinions on certain things. And to see people hash it out in front of others, to see, who might have the more sound, who stands in truth and who stands, to be corrected is a very interesting way to gain knowledge and to have a fun time doing it.
And why it's called Fight Club? I mean, unfortunately, no one's actually going to fist fight.
Who knows? Maybe you could. Maybe we'll have a surprise MMA fight at the end.
Yeah, hopefully. But aside from that, it's called Anarchapulco Fight Club because of the fact that we're going to have we haven't worked out the details of how many, but we're going to have some sort of, or someone responsible for judging these, or probably a group of people, but they're going to be doing it based on a rubric of the
integrity of how to actually argue a point,
exactly,
versus if you just start getting into a fight or a name calling match,
meaning ad hominems and other logical fallacies will be penalized, and it's essentially like
and arguing the point and being consistent in your, in the things that you bring up and having a holistic picture of what you're trying to deliver is obviously important.
So it's essentially like debate club.
Yeah.
Like the actual scoring of the judgment won't be based on who thinks they're right or wrong. It's based on who presents an argument that's the most, at least
concise,
logically consistent and has the fewest holes in it, which I guess would be kind of a good way to determine who's right or wrong in an objective sense. But I'm excited for it. It's gonna sound. I love this kind of stuff. I think some of the best events that I've ever seen have been just two people sitting on chairs on stage, just debating each other, discussing, having a long form conversation where they disagreed.
Yeah, I love it.
I've become more illuminated. I mean, I've had my opinion changed, or I've had it reinforced by such things. But I think those kinds of conversations are. It's the crucible that any good idea has to go through in order to prove itself, and if it can, then it probably has value.
Yeah, exactly. If it can survive the test, the crucible, exactly.
If you could defend an argument without, and be logically consistent and without, I guess, what would you call it? Like we keep using logical fallacies, but I mean,
and then other things like appealing to authority or not arguing the central point, not focusing on the questions that are being asked.
Well, essentially resort to these kind of rhetorical tactics that are not in furtherance of your ideas or of your point, but rather a way to discredit your opponent.
Exactly.
That's what we are trying to avoid, and that's why we're creating a kind of rubric to grade this on, so that people can at the very least, practice debating and arguing the right way, in a way that's going to actually convince people and convey their message.
Yeah, and that's going to be sick. So let us know in the comments if there's any cool, specific topics that kind of have, two sides to them, or even if there's more sides to it. Things that you think would be good for sort of an anarchist fight club thing, because we're going to be brainstorming some stuff, but it's always cool to hear from you guys to see what you guys think.
Anything else, Carm?
We actually covered everything except for one thing. And I'm going to actually try to connect all of this to this one thing.
All right. I don't even know what this one thing is, but let's go.
You don't know what it is?
Well, I'm assuming after you connect all the dots, I will.
All right. So this is initially going to sound like it's coming out of nowhere, but I'm going to bring it back full circle in a way that's going to blow everyone's fucking mind, including yours. All right. So the last topic that we wanted to bring up, me and Sonny are huge anime fans.
Oh, yes. I forgot about this.
And we absolutely love the anime known as Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super or Dragon Ball GT or whatever incarnation of it.
Oh, stop. Not GT.
Listen, the final season of GT was kind of cool, but then everything else sucked.
But it's not even canon anymore.
Yeah, it's not canon. It doesn't. I mean, it's sort of just like a wild spin-off. But anyway, regardless, before we get too into it, the whole thing with Dragon Ball that's so cool to me is just the fact that you had so many sick characters that all did this crazy shit. They could fly. They were insane martial artists. They saved the world from evil, and they did it in cool ways. It wasn't I don't know, they flew around and blew shit up by shooting energy blasts out of their hands. You know what I mean? That's the coolest way to save the world ever. You know what I mean? But how I'll tie this all in, which is really interesting, is one time I watched a YouTube video on the concept of Goku's Kamehameha wave and how it actually might be possible in physical reality.
You're dying to do. Carmen is convinced, just for you guys, Carmen is convinced that he's going to be the first person to actually perform a Kamehameha in real life.
I don't know if I'll be the first person, because chances are I'll have to learn it from somebody who already knows how to do it.
Okay, well, you think he's going to be a person.
But yeah, I think at one point that's one of my biggest dreams ever in life, is to just, even if it's just a little a little fucking, yeah, just a little I send my cat across the room and he's just meow. I'm yes, it's enough. But all right, so this ties into the Tesla shit, esoterica, all this other stuff, and somehow Dragon Ball Z. So Goku's Kamehameha wave is essentially a beam of energy that he fires when he puts his two hands together. He essentially creates a ball of energy inside of his hands, and then he releases it out at his opponent, and it either like it obliterates them, blows them up, or if it's not strong enough, it just kind of hurts them, and they survive and they keep fighting. And so it's so funny because the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. So there are 4 states of matter, essentially, according to conventional science. You have solids, liquids, and gases. Everybody knows that. And then you have plasma. And essentially, this is just essentially based on like a heat matrix. So solid is the coldest form of whatever material it is, and each material has different melting points, boiling points, solid temperatures, liquid temperatures. Like for example, like liquid oxygen, like, you know what I mean? Like, have you ever held liquid oxygen? That would be ridiculous. It's like, it's always an air at room temperature. But then
what would you have to do? Heat it up to a point in which it...
So it's a gas now? So you would have to cool it to condense it to a liquid. Because essentially when you heat liquid, it boils into a gas. So in order to get a gas to become a liquid, you would have to cool the gas.
So if you cooled air, it would liquefy, theoretically?
You would have to cool it to a very, very cool temperature. You know what I mean? Like, so like liquid nitrogen. So nitrogen at room temperature is a gas, but nitrogen actually becomes liquid at a low enough temperature that you only need it like freezer level temperatures to keep it like that. So it's different for every element.
And a plasma is heated up gas.
A plasma, is when gas becomes heated, it becomes like this weird fucking substance that like sticks together and like,
it's like ethereal. It's so weird.
It's crazy. And it's essentially what lightning is.
It's like a liquid gas or something.
Yeah, it's weird, dude. It's just a crazy thing. So essentially, like, if you consider to be, and if you look into like Eastern, like meridians and stuff like that, and the Hindus and the Chinese and the Japanese, they see like the human body as a series of meridians and energy conduits. You know what I mean? And like they believe that there are 2 powerful ones in your hands. They call them chakras in like the Indian thing, right? So like, essentially the theory behind this is that what Goku is doing is when he's doing a Kamehameha wave is he's taking the air in between his hands, and he's essentially, because he's actually raised the power of his spirit energy, he generates enough bioelectricity to essentially heat the gas in between his hands into a ball of plasma. And that is what a Kamehameha wave actually is plasma, essentially lightning, or light, if you think about it, light energy, spirit energy, and he condenses it into actual physical plasma and shoots all of his spirit energy into it to form a crazy explosion to obliterate his opponent. So from a physics perspective, it's actually possible. It's just the practicality part that is the difficult part. That's the limiting factor. It's physically generating the amount of voltage you would have to generate out of the palms of your hands,
right? I feel like
to make plasma happen in between.
That's where I see the hitch in your plan.
Well, here's what gets into this, the whole concept of pranic breathing and stuff like that. There's a lot of people who consider the breath to be an accelerator, or like, essentially, you know how your engine is like this little piston, and when you rev it, it goes faster? Think of your breath as like the same thing. You can do that and rev more energy, and you can breathe more like current into your like, essentially like circuitry. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, through like that crazy, they call it breath of fire, you're essentially feeding this energy, and like, through that and through like qigong and all that shit.
So that's what he's doing when he's doing that.
It's like, and then he's also moving his ki or his spirit energy into this like physical form to generate heat. So that's the concept behind that. Nikola Tesla could do this with machines. So Nikola Tesla did all this with machines. He just used machines that could create plasma, and he would electrocute himself with it. He could create plasma that healed himself, or you could create plasma that could destroy buildings on September 11th. Remember, Goku's Kamehameha wave could destroy buildings. Let us not forget. So to tie one last crazy fucking thing that ties into the ancient cultures and shit. This is what I wanted to, the one thing I wanted to bring up about this. So there's a whole backstory that gets introduced in DBZ about the Saiyans, right? And about how like there's this race of like essentially like beast men that are different from humans. Now, there's a concept in ancient Kemet, or which was like what preceded Egypt, about like essentially the original people were like the Moors. Have you heard about like this concept, the concept of the Moors?
I mean, the term Moors was used to describe like North Africans for like a number, like especially in like the Middle Ages and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Well, a lot of people talk about the ancient cultures of Kemet, which evolved into Egypt, as being like this culture of the Moors, which were like essentially Africans, like pure black people. And a lot of people believe that, like, at least from a genetic perspective, that might have been like how humanity started. Like that was like essentially the initial genetic blueprint. And then what happened was there was some sort of another genetic imprint that came into the picture. No one knows what or how this is. Like, you know, some people say aliens, you know what I mean? Some people say transdimensional beings. Who knows what the fuck it is? But there's always, if you look in the stories of Babylon and all these like these things, they talk about like essentially a perversion of the genome of humanity into like less human and more beast, or more like, you know, darkness. And that was the whole concept behind the Saiyan and looking at the full moon and becoming a beast, is like they secretly were like these beast warriors that were like, and that was a tribute to that. And Piccolo represented the Moors who knew about all of this and preserved the ancient knowledge. That's why him and Kami were the guardians of like the earth and shit, and created the Dragon Balls, because they knew about the Dragon Balls being a reference to the 7 chakras, and how if you awaken all 7 chakras, you'll get your wishes granted because you're connected to the ether realms. It's all crazy powerful for all of that. So I just think it's crazy how symbology makes its way into pop culture.
You think that was intentional?
My heart says yes, dude. My heart says there's a part of Akira Toriyama that just understood a lot of these concepts and introduced them, especially with the 7 Dragon Balls concept. Like, that's too simple. Like, a dragon, it's the Kundalini serpent. You know what I mean? The Kundalini grows up the fucking 7 chakras and explodes out the head, and you can manifest things. They literally, 7 Dragon Balls come together, activate, a dragon comes out and grants a wish. It couldn't be more like akin to it. You know what I mean?
That's nice. I never thought of it that way, but that's a really interesting way to look at Dragon Ball Z and like the symbology of it. As a fan, I'm really interested.
Yeah, and how the Kamehameha wave could possibly be possible. If anybody's figured it out, teach me how to do it. Let's have some training sessions.
Carmen's gonna have training sessions once a week where he's just gonna go on Facebook Live and rub his hands together and try to make plasma. You just breathe real heavy while he does it.
I'll keep you guys posted on how that works. But for now, I think that's it, man. I think that's all we got for this week.
It was a good second one. If you guys are sticking around for this one, and not just for the drama that we had to, you know, talk about last week, I appreciate it. Please comment any kind of suggestions in terms of guests or topics you want us to bring up. We said this before, we want this to be like an interactive experience. We have an intimate little following right now, and we like to we really just want to cater to you guys and kind of make some content that you'll be interested in. So we're thinking about some interviews. We have some people in mind that we would like to bring on the show, but if you guys have any suggestions at all, please leave them in the comments or email us or whatever, and let us know, because we're going to try to make this as good of a podcast as we can.
Hell yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate your support. And that was The State of Anarchy.
Episode 2.
Hope you enjoyed that awesome video. We got plenty more videos like that coming, including all the speeches and presentations from Anarchadelphia. This year's Anarchadelphia was one for the history books, man. We had some great speeches, we had some great speakers, we had some great interactions, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Everybody who came out really gave us the best feedback. We couldn't be more pleased with how everything rolled out. It was an entirely self-funded event. Thank you guys for making it possible. We couldn't have done it without you. So now that leads me into our next thing that we want to show you guys, is something else that's not just a conference, but something that you can do year-round to empower yourself. We've partnered with Richard Grove from Autonomy to show you a program. It's basically a curriculum, an unschooling curriculum that allows you to learn all the shit that you didn't learn in school, and how to actually prosper when the deck is stacked against you in the world that we live in. Because make no mistake, there is forces keeping us from being autonomous and from being free. So you can check the link below to figure stuff like that out. It's an awesome curriculum, and I'm doing it myself. I can't believe how powerful it is. Anarchadelphia next year is going to be sick. But until then, it's time to skate some parties.